Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil and TireRack.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, Brian Robinson.
Hello, and welcome to podcast number 290. This is not John Davis. This is Brian Robinson filling in for the big boss this week, getting some well-deserved time off. And joining me today is Greg Carlos, Jessica Ray, and assistant road test producer Stephen Truant for the first time on a MotorWeek podcast. It's been 290, Stephen. What's taking you so long?
Just showed up about a year ago, so
all right.
Things happen.
All right, well, we'll look forward to hearing about the Honda CR-V hybrid from you. But first, we're going to look a little farther into the future with the 2024 Volvo EX90. Jessica?
Yeah, so this is basically the all-electric version of the XC90, which is their Volvo's flagship SUV. Now, EX is the new, I don't know if this is the new nomenclature going forward, but it kind of makes a bit more sense to me than C, personally, for their pure electrics.
C? Yeah, they've had a C before.
Well, no, I know, but that's what I'm saying. I think it makes...
Recharge.
They're all over the place with recharge, but not all recharge are strictly
correct.
EVs.
Some are PHEVs.
Yeah.
And then they had the C40 recharge, but that wasn't, they had C's before, and that didn't necessarily denote C, and that's the only C in their lineup. So,
and then if they were going to make this the XE90, that would be confusing because it's the XC90, which would confuse people. They just really backed themselves into a corner.
I know, and
they didn't think far enough into the future.
Right, and they're not even consistent with it. Some things are called something in Europe, and they're called something here, and then they change all the time.
And some of them have recharge on them, and then some of them don't.
Right, some are T8 recharge, and then some are just recharge.
Yeah.
Too many numbers and letters.
They're just
Makes
winging
my
it
head
at this
hurt.
point.
Anyway, I'm sure
figuring it out.
everyone listening could care less about that.
That was we actually started with our rant today.
So back to the EX90.
So it's a 7-seater. This is made ground up as an all-electric, which is beneficial in the fact that, with the other EV, the pure electrics that Volvo has done, they've adapted already, platforms that were made for gas engines. So they just weren't optimized for all electrics.
The C40 wasn't unique platform?
Like completely unique. The way that they spun the C40 was their first vehicle designed as an all-electric that didn't have a gas motor, because it's still, I'm pretty sure, the same underpinnings as the XC40, if I'm not mistaken, because it shares a ton with it. And even range and stuff, battery.
Yeah, it's all the same setup as Polestar 2, same platform.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So this is apparently a bit more interior space. It looks really good. I think it looks incredibly attractive. It's not really moving too far away from what design language we've seen from Volvo, and especially with their all-electrics. It has a 111 kilowatt hour battery, which is pretty big. And that should get you around 300 miles, maybe a little bit over that, because this is a 7-seater, so this is a pretty decently sized SUV. It will at first only come with a dual motor all-wheel drive setup that can get up to 496 horsepower, which is pretty impressive. Honestly, Volvo's, I think the C40 recharge, that was over 400 horsepower, and it was just really a really fun driving experience. And this also has bi-directional charging, so you can charge other things with it, other cars. You can plug it into your house and use it as a generator sort of situation if you have that set up. It also has a little bit of a different interior. Volvo said that they're kind of moving away from sharing so much with Polestar, so we'll see differences between the models in the future. It has now, instead of I mean, it kind of had like a longer length portrait infotainment screen,
right.
but this is bigger. This is like 14.5 inches, and it's a bit more like an iPad that's kind of like stuck in there. But one of the, I think, most interesting things about this is that it has cameras, it has radar, but it also comes with LiDAR, which is really, really interesting. That means a lot for the technology that's going to be in this vehicle, a lot of safety systems, a lot of, when I think of like LiDAR usage in vehicles, I think like that's one of the extra checks, right? Cameras are checking things, the radars are checking things, and LiDAR is just like another check. And they all have their own use cases in different scenarios. So LiDAR is pretty impressive. But that also means that this is not going to come cheap. I think they don't have prices out, but I mean, I think most people are estimating this to cost somewhere around like $80,000 to start.
Yeah, that iX that we had in, similar size, right? Well, actually, even bigger than the iX, and that thing was 100 plus. So, I mean, that's not outrageous.
Yeah. And it has
dealer markups.
Well, yeah. Well, this comes in 2024, so who knows what or late 2023 potentially. But it also has, probably one of the last things I will say about it is that it has these like what they're calling Thor hammer headlights, which are like
Scandinavian.
really,
that's been their
really
signature for a
interesting.
while. Yeah.
So it's they're really impressive looking. A lot of people are saying that's really going to be expensive to replace, but I think they're really cool.
Welcome to 2020.
Yeah, that's
2022. I said 2020.
Sorry.
I still live in 2020
I'm right there with you,
once
Rick.
COVID happened, everything just shut down.
But yeah, no.
I'm sure it will be very successful, very luxurious.
I always wondered how Volvo's how their buyers respond to the technology we've seen in Volvos recently, because really the XC90 was like their kind of their like catapult into the new age with like I think that one debuted the
Spot
screen
platform and the Census touchscreen. Yeah.
and because like I had trouble with it early on, and I always every time I get into a Volvo, I feel like it gets worse for me as I get older. Like I'm trying to use things on the screen, and the font's so like small, and like everything's so like close and together, and you're trying to do a simple task, and it ends up being not so simple. I'm just curious. I mean, I see a lot of them on the road, so I assume that maybe they have attracted a younger buyer with the styling and some of the new technology. But you know, that traditional Volvo buyer, I wonder what their thoughts are on this new age Volvo.
Integrating Google more and more into it as well, and they just. Like a lot of manufacturers, they want you to just speak everything into existence.
Correct.
Yeah, which can also be frustrating when you're a mumbler, much like myself.
Because you also find yourself actually like getting mad at the assistant. Like, maybe it's just me.
I'm just so used to CarPlay anyway. You know, it's like I don't even think that a lot of the Volvos we've had recently have had wireless CarPlay. You still need like the hardwire for the USB cable.
You do. I
That
mean,
doesn't bother me.
They
Yeah.
actually, they only just put CarPlay in their vehicles because they released this new Android Automotive. It's not Android Auto, it's
Right.
Android Automotive. And when they released that, they did not have any. They didn't have Android Auto, or no, they just didn't have Apple CarPlay. So
I thought they had Apple CarPlay to start, and then they got rid of it, and then it came back.
Right.
I thought I remember using it early on in Volvos. That had
it was-
When they upgraded to the new system,
Correct.
it wasn't
Then it went
compatible.
away.
Yeah, and now it's back.
Yeah.
Like this will have Apple
just
CarPlay.
like the McRib.
All right, we'll move on with that to another vehicle. This one is the Honda CR-V Hybrid, which Steve and you have recently driven. Is that correct?
That is correct. I was recently out in Santa Barbara, California.
Ooh, fancy.
Yeah, mid last month I think it was. Yeah, it was a really really good time. Great driving route. So yeah, essentially with the new CR-V Hybrid, you know. My family personally is a little Honda biased. My mom has a 4th gen CR-V. My brother's a 5th gen. So getting to experience the 6th gen was pretty cool. And all
Thanks for
this new
telling
updates.
us. Yeah, really appreciate that.
No, background is
Hey,
essential.
yeah.
I'll take
He's
this whole
driven
thing
though,
with
yeah.
a giant grain of salt.
So yeah, it's you know, Honda's 4th generation hybrid system. It's a 2-liter internal combustion motor paired with a 2-motor hybrid system. The hybrid sees 2 trims. It's either sport or sport touring. With that, you know, exterior styling, you see a lot of black accents. You know, within the grille, mirror caps, black wheels, stuff like that. Power-wise, it sees 3 extra horsepower opposed to the previous generation. It's 204 horsepower, 247 pound-feet of torque, which is 15 more than the previous gen. And that torque is pretty instantly available. It was pretty punchy coming out of some corners. The body itself is like 15% stiffer. Body supports, I should say, and front and rear subframes are a lot more rigid. So it soaked up bumps really, really nicely. The overall ride quality, very smooth. The powertrain saw a lot of sound deadening as well. So inside the cabin and the powertrain, sound deadening. Interior, very, very quiet experience. And then the seats are all new as well. So, it's not like a lazy boy, but overall the seats were pretty darn comfortable. I feel like I could have just kept driving for countless hours.
Not a lazy boy, but like a not so motivated child.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the other thing I thought, I don't think any other CRV has been like actually tow rated, like with a confirmation number, but this one is rated to tow 1,000 pounds. So if you got like a couple jet skis or something, you can tow a couple.
Or a lazy boy.
Or a lazy boy, yeah. You never know what you're gonna need. So the overall fuel economy too. It's 40 city, 34 highway, and 37 total. So it was just a really, really good overall experience. I think it's pretty nicely refined.
So 2023, did they have a hybrid before? Is this an all-new CRV generation or just a new hybrid? Or
It's an all-new CRV generation and an all-new hybrid system as well.
Okay.
Well,
So-
yeah.
Will they all be hybrid then? Is that the deal? Or?
No, so it's
Okay.
the Sport and Sport Touring are your lone hybrid trims. Anything else is going to be internal combustion.
This isn't the first CRV hybrid. Remember a couple years
had
ago when the CRV hybrid won Green Car of the Year or Green SUV of the Year at LA Auto Show around this time, before anybody had even driven it. Like it wasn't even a thing yet.
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
I'm sitting there at the award ceremony. I'm like, I haven't even seen this car before, and it won the award. But anyway, that's my little sidebar.
Yeah, we won't even get into what won the awards this year because it didn't get any better or it didn't make any more sense in my head. But
Well,
anyway.
this is a pretty big product for Honda specifically because what it seems like for all of their like new upcoming models is that they plan to sell 50% of CRVs as hybrids,
Yes.
which previously I believe was somewhere around 20%. So this 4th generation hybrid system goes into Civic,
and Accord.
and it'll go in Accord. So it's a pretty big, important model for the brand because they plan to sell a lot of them. In an ideal world, they'd be selling 200,000 of them a year.
Absolutely. Yeah, and they're pushing for carbon neutrality by 2050, so they're well on their way to doing so.
So we had a long-term RAV4 hybrid for quite a while, right?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Did you have any time in that, Stephen? Was that pre-Stephen Triple?
I think that was pre-Stephen days.
That was the one we had the fuel issue where it wouldn't
that's what I
quite
was
fill
going
all the
to
way
get
up.
into. Yeah. We could never figure out whether it wouldn't fill up or whether it was a smaller tank.
It wouldn't fill up. That I think it's confirmed that the tank was normal size, but there was something about the design of it.
It would trip the
That
fuel filler
would not
to
let
think
you-
that it was full when it wasn't.
And I actually don't know what happened to that.
Yeah.
I don't
It
know
was
what the
because eventually we
resolution
noticed it before Toyota officially acknowledged it.
Right.
And then right around that time, because we saw people on the internet talking about it too, and then right around that time is when Toyota did acknowledge it. But I don't know if they did like a fix for it, or if they're just like, hey, that's how it is, or well, they had to have done something about it, right? It's not something
I
I've
guess we'll have
been
to-
super concerned with in my life, so I haven't checked up on it.
I believe it's been fixed for after we had a 2019. So I think probably after like 2020 models, it should have been fixed. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Back to the CRV hybrid.
I didn't mean to take us down that road.
There's
yeah.
clearly a market for it because we talked about, it being a very important car for them because you look at what RAV4 does with the hybrid. I mean, they sell a ton of those things. RAV4s in general, but, so now for Honda and I know they had one before, but, they got to keep up with RAV4, which is it's still the best-selling, well, it's definitely the best-selling Toyota, if not the best-selling vehicle, minus subtracting the F-150.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it's still the best-selling vehicle. of the
Yeah,
year.
it's interesting their take though with their last, like the Sienna minivan, the Venza utility, that Crown. They're all hybrid.
Right. And well, that's what
They
I
don't
thought.
even just have something non-hybrid available anymore.
I said that with the Honda HR-V, like why not just make that an all like hybrid all the way through? Because I think you kind of admit with that one that your buyers aren't like concerned about automatic transmissions. That like just give them a CVT, it's fine. And I think like a hybrid now falls into that category. It's like the buyer probably isn't going to be super discerning when it comes down to the powertrain. It's like interior amenities, how big it is, fuel economy. That's about it.
No.
But yeah, Toyota seems to be taking that route where it's just like all hybrid.
Right.
That's just what the car is. And hybrids or Honda, it seems like they're still kind of
Hanging.
set on giving the option.
Yeah, and that other engine is the 1.5 turbo. Is that
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I mean, that's a great
Good engine.
It's a great engine.
I
yeah.
drove that version of it, and
Okay.
it was fine. You know, it's a little less powerful, and
Yeah.
but you know, and it's just like one of those things that, like with gas, as expensive as it is, I think if you tout like that, this car can get almost 40 miles per gallon, that will sell you more units. I think. Personally, but what it's interesting that you brought up the RAV4 because hybrid specifically, because actually they just did a study on which cars are appreciating within the 3 years of purchase, and the Jeep Wrangler's obviously first.
It was just a matter of time.
And Porsche 911 is also up there as well.
Car's appreciating.
But so is the RAV4 hybrid. It is very slow to depreciate, but it also at the same time is really good at
All of them, or
appreciating.
just the Prime? Because I know the
No,
Prime, they were jacking those things up. Big
Yeah,
time.
because I mean, they were selling literally every one they made.
I think it was just the hybrid. It was
okay.
just the hybrid. I think the Prime is a weird situation because Toyota definitely did not allocate enough units for the amount of demand that they had. So
Yeah.
the dealers were marking them up like $15,000 each.
Before we move on, and while we're on this aside, at what point do we stop calling cars hybrids? Like the reason we did it is because
point.
everybody was used to a gasoline powered, and I know hybrid means like two different things, hybrid and electric, but like we're moving so far in the directions of hybrids just being like a normal thing. Like when does that become just a powertrain? Car's powered, like a car is now officially powered by a
An electric
gas
motor.
motor and an electric motor. And at what point is there ever a point where that is just what a car is?
Well, but they kind of have like the different sectors of hybrids. Like you have
Sectors,
your
good word.
PHEVs,
Sectors.
you know, you have your PHEVs, your HEVs. You know, I'm not as well versed with everything, you know, electric going on in vehicles, but I don't know. I mean, I'm with you. I agree, but I think it's just kind of hard to say in general. Like if you can really call just a hybrid as standard, because I mean, at least until internal combustion engines like are not a lone thing anymore. You know what I mean? Like if it were to become standard, then it's like, okay, then we just don't have to label it anymore.
Yeah, and there's so many engines that aren't labeled as hybrids that have start-stop systems, which are essentially
Yeah, because
Right,
the
yeah.
mild
essentially
hybrid
mild
system.
Yeah.
hybrid system.
Yep.
Correct. So I think we're headed in that direction, but there's still so many engines that are not electrified in any way. Certainly a lot of performance stuff. It's a tough question, Greg. I don't have a good answer for you.
Well, that's, I live to stump you, Robinson.
Well, that's not too hard to do. Moving on, we're going to stick with you, Greg. You've just spent some time in the Rivian R1T,
I did spend some
which is
time.
not a hybrid.
Which is not a hybrid, correct. It is fully electric, the Rivian R1T. R1T, T for truck. This is the pickup truck version, and we talked about the LA Auto Show a few minutes ago, and this is my first introduction into Rivian, and everybody's was, what was it, like 5-6 years ago now? It was just in that tiny little stall when you went back towards like Porsche and Subaru when you go back to that hall, if you've ever been to the auto show. And it was just sitting there under these steps, and it was Rivian. And you're like, look at this truck with the cool pass-through from the, where's the engine? Oh, it's electric. Oh, cool. You can put like a 12 feet of lumber directly through the cab. And and here we are now. They were, I guess, the first all-electric pickup truck to be sold in America. They beat Ford.
I believe so, yeah.
First deliveries. Now, obviously Ford has the Lightning, and that's out being sold. You've probably seen one around. But yeah, we got to drive one. I specifically drove it at our drag strip and a little bit around, and was kind of struck by its size. I actually thought it was smaller than I expected it to be. I don't know how you guys felt when you saw it.
I'd agree.
Not a small truck, but also not like it's not a Lightning. It's not an F-150.
Yeah, definitely a mid-size truck, similar to Ridgeline, Tacoma, etc.
Definitely in that category. And I think they weren't really going after a traditional half-ton pickup truck buyer anyway. It is a 4.5 foot bed. They're all 4-door crew cabs, so you can fit some people in there. It's not so much doing a ton of work with a truck, but knowing that you can do things that you can't normally do with an SUV or a sedan. I was impressed by the fit and finish right away. We've been into the Lucid now, some Teslas we've been into, some of these like independent automakers, and the first thing you notice is usually fit and finish. You'll hear some things creaking, some things rattling. I didn't really get any of that in the Rivian, and Steven, you probably drove it a little bit too. The only thing I noticed was some suspension noise. That kind of, wouldn't say rattled, but you could hear the suspension in action when you were doing things. Speaking of the suspension, it has air suspension, and I'm not sure I've seen an air ride suspension move as quickly and as freely as this thing does. It's like when you change the setting, it gets down and it squats or shoots itself up. I mean, normally when we film these things, that's why we're so sensitive to it. It's like you push a button and you got to like zoom the camera in and like really see it move. This thing's just like you push the button and then bam, jacked up, bam, down low.
Like a low rider, right?
Yeah. I think it's like up to 6 inches of difference, which is pretty big. So that's cool. Out on the track, I usually kept it in the lowest setting for handling work, which minimized body roll to an extent. You're still sitting up fairly high compared to a car, so it rolled a little bit, but still felt pretty good through the cones. Of course, acceleration is what everybody cares about, and accelerate it did. 3.2 seconds to 60, 11.8 in the quarter at 111, but once you hit 110, it really died. Like it just died off.
And that's with the 4-motor.
4 motors, one for each wheel. Robinson, you and I talked about it. It's each launch was kind of different. Normally, you kind of get a feel for how a car launches. You know where it's going to go, which direction it's going to pull. This one, it seemed like because you had motors at all 4 corners, it was like wherever the grip was, it was like chaos theory. Like whatever that in that moment it felt it would do. So it was always different. It seemed like it was kind of like pulling itself in all different directions, not in a dangerous way, but I could just feel it seemed to like pull differently than some of those more traditional like 2-motor setups with just one on the front and rear. Super fast. That's 908 pound-feet of torque. So super torquey. Tows up to 11,000 pounds. We didn't tow with it. Curious to see. We've had some anecdotal evidence about these trucks towing with 314 miles of range on this Rivian. I would imagine that gets cut down quite a bit if you're towing.
At least half.
Yeah. So if you have any firsthand experience, let us know. Be interested to talk about that. But my favorite thing about the truck is just, and really with anything, is like gadgets. This is like a gadget truck. What was the one we tested? Like 87 grand.
Something like that, yeah.
It's for like the tech forward person, early adopters, not necessarily like a person in the trade industry, but somebody who likes to get out and do things on the weekends, and with all kinds of storage places like in the frunk, which I always love a good frunk, which even has like underfloor storage in the front.
You gotta get those shirts made up.
Even the bed, like the Ridgeline, it has under bed storage, which is cool. But the coolest one, Steven, which you were, I think, in the road test displayed, was, what do you even call that? Like behind the cab.
I think they mid trunk or something.
Something like
trunk pass through.
It's like
super trick.
Yeah,
sure.
It's like in front of the bed behind the cab, and it's low, so you pop it open. It's literally pass through. You can throw stuff back there. They got like a flashlight in the door. They got like an onboard air compressor.
Right.
They got a.
They had cables that you could plug into the bed to tie down bikes or whatever, and they would be tied in with the alarm system. So if anyone messed with the cables, they would go off.
Removable Bluetooth speaker, which might sound like stupid to you, but I think is awesome.
We fired it up too. It worked pretty well.
Yeah, and then little things like where you can take the cargo rails on the bed and then transfer them to the roof.
Yep.
All kinds of little things that, if somebody were to argue to me that it's not a truck, I would point to all these things and be like, what about this makes it not a truck? Because all these things it's about, how you use it, being able to throw something on the top or on the bed and all this storage. I mean, that's what makes it a truck.
Yeah, and I think making it more towards the non-traditional truck buyer, I think was a great thing on their part, because that's the first thing everyone, with the Lightning, the range goes down when you tow. Well, of course it does. That's, how many people really tow with their F-150s? I know a lot, but there's a lot more that don't. So they immediately kind of take themselves out of that argument of getting compared to the F-150. So I think, and all the trick features are absolutely a highlight of it for sure.
It's a very cool truck. Exciting to see more of them out on the road.
I've seen quite a few.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to keep rambling.
I have a gripe about it, though. I mean,
Okay, go
and
ahead.
we even mentioned it in the road test, how you have to go into every single screen individually in order to do a certain function.
That's what I want to talk about. The interior. Yeah, you still have the two. You have the main screen, and then you have the gauge screen, which the owners. So this was an owner's car. Shout out to Neil for letting us drive this thing. But they were both. They mentioned that, but what Tesla doesn't have is the gauge cluster behind the steering wheel, which the owners were very appreciative that the Rivian does have that. But like you said, and I fall into the trap too, Steven, is like you have to set the steering wheel, you have to set a whole bunch of settings with that screen. But for most people who own the truck, it's
One and done.
It's one and done.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like the other thing I didn't like was because I was getting in and out of the truck was you had to have the card to start it and unlock it. When you're getting in and out 15 times in an hour, it's a problem. But for daily life, not too big of a deal.
If it's your only vehicle, sure, it's cool. But there are some people, I'm sure, that might have a situation where it's the lone vehicle and a 3 or 4 person household, and everyone's taking their turn with it. And it was for me, it was mainly the steering wheel adjustment. You have to go into the screen, select it, and then there's two I don't even know what to call them. On the steering wheel,
rollers.
Thank you. That's probably the best way to put them. And then one side is for tilt, and the other side's for telescope. And it just felt like it took way too long to actually get it done. But minor gripe, but nonetheless something I wasn't a fan of.
I like its size the best. I
It
think,
was a good size.
because I'm driving the Lightning. That's a big truck. That's huge.
Yeah.
And so, we talk obviously all the time about how people don't use their F-150s that they buy, and these are big trucks. And so I think it just seems like a very good size for most people.
Garageable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Garageable. That's a good one. That's a good
All
one.
right. Any more comments on the Rivian before we move on to our lightning round?
We'll get to work on those T-shirts. What is it? I love a good front.
I love a good front.
And, and that's garageable.
All right, lightning round. Panelists will have 30 seconds for this trending automotive topic. All right, I love it. It's a long one, so bear with me in my mumbling. Shipping delays have been a common issue domestically, but it is becoming just as large of an issue internationally. The German port of Bremerhaven is facing major congestion issues, with cars clogging the areas waiting for shipment to the U.S. and other major markets. Due to lack of shipping vessels, drivers, and containers worsening the problem, is there any light at the end of the car shortage tunnel? Who wants to go first?
Steven, let's do it, man.
Let's talk about it. Why not?
Let's go with new guy. You got 30 seconds now.
Let's roll with it.
And go.
I mean, I don't know. Ever since COVID happened, everything's just been up in the air. And I know we hate the word COVID, but anyway, it's been 2-3 years. There's been the chip shortages, part shortages, everything. I hope there is, but at the same time, everything's just changing every single day. Things start to get better, and then, oh no, something happens where things go back to being worse. And I ask myself every day when I get up, like, oh, what could possibly go wrong today? And things could possibly...
Wow, this is dark. Stop. Okay, it's over.
There's 30 seconds.
Fair enough, but I don't know.
Oh, man, we were about to have
Steven,
it.
what could possibly go wrong today?
I mean, okay, so anyway, back to it. I feel like every day or like every week I keep hearing, oh, used cars prices are going down. But they don't go down in any significant way, maybe just slightly, like evening out from being like crazy than what they used to be.
Yeah, they're going down in the sense like budget cuts. When the government makes budget cuts, they don't really cut. They just don't raise as much as they said they were going to.
Right, yeah.
That's how used car prices just aren't climbing as fast as they were.
Exactly, yeah. So it's so tough to know when this could potentially, like, things could start moving their way back to normal, just with the fact that there's a lack of people being able to do a lot of these things. I think in certain cases, especially like with deliveries, there's trucks that are made or there's cars being made, but they just don't have people to get them from point A to your house. So I don't know. Just I right now don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm hoping 2024 is a good year for us where we see things really bounce back. But I don't know. I also feel like just maybe things are going to be very different in the automotive world. I don't think things will ever go back to normal.
Time's up, Greg.
Well, yeah, I'll take off on where you ended up. Yeah, I think dealers have gotten used to the low inventory. They're starting to realize, like, hey, maybe we didn't need all that inventory on our lots. So they're starting to rethink how to do things, even if things do get back to normal, if there is such a thing anymore. And then to go back to the depressing tone that Steven started.
Oops.
Yeah, I wouldn't get your hopes up on any light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I'm not going to prognosticate. I don't get paid to do it, but they can't even do it right because when it first started, they're like, oh, well, people aren't going to buy lumber. People bought a ton of lumber, and guess what? There was a lumber shortage.
Yeah.
People aren't going to buy cars. Guess what? Tons of people bought cars. Car shortage. So I'm not even sure what you can call here, but I just feel like even if one thing gets better, because this is the trend what we've had, another thing's going to get worse. So take that as you will, and I'm just going to go back to bed.
Yeah, I don't really have any ray of sunshine to shine on the light on the topic either. There's always a different thing. First it was the chips, then it was the boats couldn't get unloaded, then it was the truck driver shortage. I mean, it's always something different popping up.
Ships sinking, like literally ships sinking.
Or catching on fire. So I will say the one positive thing, I'm in and out of dealers a lot, getting cars and talking to different dealerships. Their inventory is going up a little bit, so that's positive. The other thing is, as kind of Greg was hinting on, buying a car has changed a lot in that you don't go in and then you pick from 20 that are on the lot. Now you get to go in. If you're not in a hurry, you can say, I want this exact.
Yeah.
You can get it built exactly the way you want it and generally not have to pay more for that. Whereas before, you were pretty much you would have to pay more if you wanted something special ordered,
orders.
and it would take a long time. Now it's kind of, they can work it right in.
You can just do it on your phone.
Yep.
You can do it right now if you wanted to.
You get exactly the vehicle that you want, not one that's on a lot somewhere. So maybe that's the one positive thing I can see that's come out of all of it.
But then when it does get to you, and if it's a gas-powered car, your catalytic converter will just get stolen. So, so as soon as you get something, you lose something. That's what I'm trying to tell everyone.
All right. Let's quickly move on to this viewer question. And I thought this question was, not the most interesting question, I'll put it that way. But turns out the more we think about it, the more interesting it has become. This is from Annie. If I am in an accident with a self-driving car, who is responsible? Now, she doesn't mention whether she's in the vehicle or she's being hit by the vehicle. She doesn't really specify. But does anyone have an answer for Annie?
I think the most important thing to mention, of course, is that there are no self-driving cars on the road.
Explain what you mean by that, because
There are no
I
cars.
fear all about self-driving cars all the time.
There are no vehicles that can get you from point A to point B without you having to monitor them the entire time.
All right.
Legally, there are no vehicles that can do that. Even if any manufacturer out there decides to tout that they could, right now there are none.
Could, sure. Should,
Probably
not so much.
So
Not
with that,
given our current state.
right. So with that clarification, if Annie is hit by another driver who is using one of the many semi-autonomous systems that are available, whose fault is that?
So if they are using, say, something like Super Cruise, a hands-free driver assistance system, which is only level 2, it is still whoever hit you, it is their responsibility. No matter if you are using any driver assistance program in a vehicle, you still have to be monitoring them. I mean, that includes us. We use Super
And they
Cruise.
tell
Blue
you.
Cruise.
The
Yes.
system tells you, and it looks if the level 2s, like you said, Super Cruise, they have eye monitors. You have to be looking forward. And it'll tell you if you're not looking forward. And I think even before you start the system or when you start it, it'll say something along the lines of driver must be able to take control of the car or must be paying attention, which means the onus lies on you, the driver.
Correct.
Sitting in the
Currently.
driver's seat.
Correct.
Yes, absolutely.
So ultimately, is in the state as of what is today, November 14th of 2022, of all cars sold, all drivers of that car are responsible if it's in an accident.
Correct.
If you cause the accident.
Right.
Yes, yes, because these driver assistance systems, they give you so many alerts. I mean, they vibrate your seat. When they say, "Oh, we can't find the lane anymore," you have to take back control. So you have to be watching the entire time. Now, when it comes to the future, because we will have vehicles that have forms of autonomy. Let's refer to
Theoretically,
that.
yeah.
Forms of autonomy. And so that's all being legislated right now because there are no real true laws on the books. And it's very complicated because in Europe, it's a little bit easier to legislate the roads because of the EU and such like that. In the U.S., every state has different rules and laws. So every state is going to have their legislature approve the rules of the road, essentially. And whether they grab that from other states is we'll see how that ends up happening. But California is very likely going to be the first to kind of move forward with that.
Shocker.
Yeah, big shocker. But so I guess the real answer to this is that once the lawmakers come up with the laws that allow these autonomous systems, then we will know much more about who is liable in cases of accidents and such. But I will say that my experience in a level 3 system, which is in simplistic terms, it's conditional autonomy, so it can be autonomous in a very, 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 very small use case. And the vehicles are made that if they no longer can function properly, they come to a safe stop somewhere. So I think there might be this perspective that like these cars are going to be like running rampant or something. I don't see that personally being the case. But there's a lot more smart people that are testing these and making sure that they are really able to function well on roads. And but it's gonna be a little bit until we see any of that. So
I mean, how many times have you been driving and you see something and you're like, "Wow, I never saw that before." Like, I mean,
True.
so right, so these things can't possibly be prepared for every scenario.
They can't even handle a day like a day like today, driving on the highway when the sun's coming up. There's systems that freak out when the sun's too directly into their system.
I mean, and you think rain is a pretty big
snow that builds up
deterrent.
on it. I mean, they're just
That's why I think the importance of asking this question and us addressing it is to mention that, you know, this is not a reality we live in right now. And it probably won't be a reality we live in for quite a few years.
Yeah, I'm still not convinced it'll ever truly, you know, people get in a car, program a destination, and then never touch the steering wheel.
I absolutely
I'm not
agree.
sure
Too much that can go
will-
wrong.
I'm not sure that we'll ever
There's
get
too many
to that point.
variables.
Right, and it only
Yes.
takes one major catastrophe to happen, and then, you know, lawsuits happen, and somebody steps in and shuts it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like when
Vehicles-
we had that Silverado that had the Super Cruise, that was the first time I experienced it, and like at somewhat form of autonomous driving. And yeah, it's cool, it's interesting, but it's weird. And there's as we said, too many variables that can happen. You know, if it were to be a malfunction or just a total shutdown, and you lose control of the vehicle, what have you. And then there's even been cases where, you know, people start, you know, accusing the manufacturer of, oh, well, your system failed, I got into an accident.
it'll get
now I'm hurt.
acrimonious.
Yeah,
real
it
quick.
gets-
As soon as it starts happening.
And also, I think we have to keep in mind that the manufacturers do not want to be sued for things like this
not.
as well. That, you know, liability wise. So,
Doesn't deter some of them though.
true. That's a good point. Maybe I should use the word traditional manufacturers. But no, I think it's a great question, and you know, I think it'll be interesting when you guys experience some of the level 3 systems that are coming out.
All I
think
can really
they're
say is that,
interesting.
in my opinion, your name's on the vehicle, you're on the insurance, you're behind the wheel, you're responsible. That's my take.
Cars are dangerous weapons, so
They are.
yeah.
94%.
I was thinking about that the other day of how to word that as well. You're just driving 2 tons of death.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
That Hummer, man.
yeah, just
A lot of responsibility behind the wheel of that thing.
That's 4.5 tons
Yeah,
of death.
Yeah.
So maybe pay a little bit of attention while you're driving because it is a serious thing.
Put your foot down.
That's a great way to end it, Greg.
Yeah, that was
Appreciate
it. That's
that.
a rant right there.
Speaking of, are there any rants and or raves from anyone?
Steven,
Do you have
let it rip,
anything?
man.
Any
Take your
questions
time.
for you?
Well, I mean, I know it's something that's been talked about a lot over the
It
years.
doesn't stop us.
Yeah, let's
We'll
let's
rant
get
about
into
the
it.
same thing over and over again.
I was riding around with my dad yesterday, and you know, in one of his work units, you know, it's a newer Honda Pilot, and he was talking about, like, you know, what is it with all these electric parking brakes? And he's like,
Your dad, Jerry Seinfeld.
he is not.
What's the deal?
So, and like the whole term of an emergency brake is just for that, an emergency, and you can't really pull an electric parking brake, can you, in the event of an emergency?
can.
Well, yeah, we have talked about that. Yeah.
Okay, because I just didn't know, and I was like, well, that's a great question and definitely worth talking about at least. I'm used to just, you know, old school handle. If you need it, it's like also the drama too. It's like, grab the handle, not the let me push this tab and hopefully come to a stop.
I never know which way to push it. I
Right, 'cause
usually
some are
push it
different.
in, but you're supposed to like
Some
pull
you can
it
do
up.
both ways, some
Yeah.
you can't.
Yeah.
But you can actually. You pull usually hold it in one direction, and
It is pretty
activate.
responsive
Yeah.
too. Okay, well, I learn something new every day.
Yeah. So my suggestion is to go home and get in your dad's Pilot.
Yank on the E button.
Go on the Beltway and 60 miles, 65 miles an hour approximately, and then just pull that back. and
I will
hold
be
on
sure to
it.
send you my hospital invoice.
And then, and
I
then
need some new brakes
You
after
can
it,
say,
but-
well, it was the Honda's fault because I was just holding the button. Yeah, most of them, I can't speak for all of them, but yeah, they will. If you hold the button or hold the lever back, however you initiate it, will have an emergency type brake.
Okay.
But I think we're getting away from emergency brakes in general, and that most people just consider them parking brakes. I mean,
Sure.
Yeah.
back in the day when we had drum brakes and stuff, you know, losing your brakes was an actual real possibility. That not generally something that happens these days. Although I'm sure there
It's
are
happened to 2
instances.
people I know in the last couple of months, actually.
And having worked
So
at a
other
dealership
than-
before, I've seen some
really?
interesting
Good
scenarios.
Lord.
A lot of vehicles that came into the dealership, man, you'd be terrified seeing some of them.
So take care of your brakes, no matter what kind of
100%.
you have.
Important, yeah.
That's always good advice. And with that, we will wrap it up. Be sure to check us out on all the usual places on the internets and PBS Mav TV. I will thank our audio engineer, David Wainwright, podcast producer, Jessica Ray, and podcast creator, Bob Mixter, the maker of all things good.
Who's never
here
on these
at
podcasts,
MPT.
ironically.
I know.
even
We
though
should
he
force him
created
into
it.
it. Yeah.
You can't create something and then just run away from it.
Bob has like a grandfathered in spot on MotorWeek because
We always leave a chair open for him.
Yeah.
What you guys don't see is there's always a chair open for Bob if he ever just wants to sit in on this.
You'll see Bob's name show up in old episodes from the first probably like 10 seasons, I think. He used to.
Bob has been a longtime fixture of Maryland Public Television and also of MotorWeek, and we appreciate all of his help over the years. And with that, we'll thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching MotorWeek.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil and TireRack.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.